The evening in Los Angeles was drawing to a hot close, charming lights were lit on the streets, and laughter and conversation filled the air, but hidden amidst the hustle and bustle of luxury was a man who had something entirely different in mind. Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX and Tesla, had always been at the forefront of technology and ideas, but now he was going to venture into the unknown. He was going to be homeless. The idea came to him spontaneously when he was waiting for his car at an elite restaurant and noticed how indifferently the homeless people sitting on the sidewalks passed by. Their faces were full of loss and suffering, and it was as if they were invisible to everyone. Why did no one pay attention to them? Why was society so indifferent to those who found themselves at the bottom of the social ladder? These thoughts haunted him, and eventually he decided to conduct a social experiment. Preparation took several days. Elon gathered a team of his trusted people and together they developed a plan. Processing the image of a homeless person required careful elaboration of every detail. He understood that it was important not only to look, but also to feel in this role. The clothes were bought at a second-hand store: stretched jeans, a worn-out jacket, dirty sneakers, and an old, shabby hat. He added a fake beard and a little makeup to this, for realism. The next day, Elon changed his clothes and went out into the streets of Los Angeles, carrying a suitcase full of the necessary things. The unusual way he held himself, as if he was lost in this world, increased the tension inside him with every step. Mixed feelings, from excitement to fear, overwhelmed him when he first encountered people on the street. He saw how passers-by looked at him with distrust and pity. Sometimes their looks turned into complete ignorance. Elon spent the morning until lunchtime talking to other homeless people, listening to their stories and sharing his own experiences. He learned that each of them had to face their own demons. Some had lost their jobs, others their families, and some had given up hope and turned to alcohol. It was not only an experiment, but also a profound engagement with humanity, which led him to understand how much people have in common, regardless of their status. At noon, Elon headed to one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. This was the final test of his experiment. He wanted to see how society would react to him when he intruded into their world like an unwanted guest. As he entered, he inhaled tensely, the air full of the aroma of the chef's dishes, mixed with a slight touch of exclusivity. Inside the restaurant, there was a special atmosphere, not only because of the expensive decorations, but also because of the smug smiles of the customers, lost in their own worlds. And so, when he entered, all eyes turned to him, whispers, bewilderment, laughter. This accompanied his every step. The waiters exchanged glances, their emotional reactions were lightning fast. Elon noticed how a mixture of curiosity and disgust appeared in people's eyes. The awkwardness that arose grew, and soon the manager of the establishment approached. With the air of an icy commander, he began to demand that the client be removed, who, in his opinion, was disturbing the atmosphere of the establishment. Elon decided he would not back down. He tried to talk to the manager, to explain his intentions, but his words only caused more indignation. He realized that he was trapped. The reaction to his presence became the very embodiment of social division, unacceptable in a time when humanity should be above all else. Every moment became more absurd, because he, a man, entered a world that apparently did not tolerate those in a difficult situation. The experiment, just beginning, was already giving strong impressions. He was about to find out how deep the hatred of this worldview runs, of poverty, loss, and, of course, of someone who can see what others would prefer to ignore. That evening, Elon was about to encounter the truth he had long sought. Within minutes of the restaurant manager, huddled in his crisp white uniform, approaching Elon, he began to feel the excitement receding, replaced by something deeper, anger. It was the feeling that had been at odds with his efforts to conduct this experiment, and it was the key moment in his transformation. "You don't understand," Elon began, trying to speak calmly, even though his heart was pounding. "I didn't come here to embarrass you, I just wanted to see how you treat people who have the right to the same space you do." But the manager just shook his head, expressing complete bewilderment. The other customers, winking and whispering, waited to see what would happen next. Questions and guesses about what was happening began to whisper around the room, mixing with the noise of glasses and cutlery. The tension grew, like a snake coiling before it pounced. "This is no place for people like you," the manager said with mild disdain, "Our audience values atmosphere. Get out of here before I call security." The words cut through Elon like a sharpened knife. If he had truly been a poor man suffering from neglect, perhaps the feeling would have been even more desperate, but he was no ordinary bum. He was a man who was both billionaire and activist. He was not ashamed of his success, but he was ashamed of the reaction his reflection in the eyes of his manager and clients provoked. They did not see him as a person. They saw a stain on an otherwise immaculate desk. "I just want to talk," he tried again, lowering his voice, but the words were perceived as a fleeting sound, cut through by the immature laughter and whispers of society. "Talk to who? To a homeless person? You'd better leave while you can," the manager answered, and Elon noticed a spark of threat in his eyes. At that moment, he realized that the experiment had reached its limit. He tried his best to talk about human dignity, about equality, but he was met only with a wall of misanthropy and indifference. His patience was wearing thin, and his anger was growing. No one present wanted to hear that all the rights they celebrated in their environment, and the claims to differences from other people, were ultimately just a shell. Everyone was in the grip of an illusion. Soon, after a few difficult words, Elon finally decided that his time in this pool of coincidences was up. He stepped aside, turning toward the exit. The closing door of the restaurant again echoed the sound of his disappointment, like a heartbeat dying in an irretrievable void. On the street he was met by a world of bright sunshine and fresh air. He felt free, but at the same time, lonely, and every step he took on the threshold of this expensive establishment made it clear how much his inner perception had changed. He had become not just an observer, but a participant who had touched the sharpness of reality. He would remember the faces of people who looked at him with disdain, but also the stories of those who fought for their lives every day. As he passed the cafe where the townsfolk sat with cups of coffee and bread, he felt the difference between these worlds. Each person sitting there had a story, but for most, it didn't seem to matter. The unknown world of people he saw on the street also had its hopes, fears, and dreams. All that was missing was that connecting link, that spark of understanding. By evening he decided to return to the hotel, his permanent room, which inexorably reminded him of his past life, of wealth, status and popularity, but, strangely enough, this no longer caused him much delight. Instead, he was tormented by thoughts of how, at a minimum, many of his acquaintances could wake up tomorrow with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Elon Musk's decision that day was not just an experiment, but a real test of humanity. He realized that his role went beyond just one day. During this experience, he felt the need to speak up for those who often remain in the shadows. He returned to his project with renewed vigor, with new opportunities for action, but now his goal was not just research, but to spread the word about the importance of human dignity for everyone, regardless of their social status. This was just the first chapter of his journey, a journey to rethink what it means to be human in the modern world. Already in the hotel, sitting on the edge of the bed, Elon began to analyze his feelings, to capture every little thing, every emotion that he experienced that day. He opened his laptop and began to write down his thoughts, creating not just a report on a social experiment, but a vast study of human nature. How ambiguous the world is. In a matter of hours, he could see how the expression of contempt turned into hostility, and indifference into greed. Each of the restaurant's customers was preoccupied with their own problems, and in the process, they forgot about those who had not even had a chance to touch such a life. Everyone was preoccupied with their own reflection, forgetting that the light of these lights does not touch only those who cannot pay for them. Elon closed his laptop, looking out the window at the night Los Angeles, sparkling with lights, like a fairy tale labyrinth. He realized how important it is for people to have space for constructive dialogue. Perhaps this is what is so lacking in the lives of each of us, mutual understanding and empathy. At that moment, an idea occurred to him: how the lack of experience like his could create a platform for discussions about the status and fate of homeless people in society. The next morning, he was back on the streets, but not as a homeless person. He no longer felt like that, being within his status as a successful person. However, he knew that many would still perceive him that way. Now his goal was to create something more than just an observation. He wanted to launch a campaign that would unite people around the need to understand and support those who are left behind in society. Elon met with groups of volunteers working with the homeless, joining them in their charitable initiatives. He became not only a conduit for ideas, but also someone who actively wanted to change the situation. He held meetings where he inspired people to start projects dedicated to helping communities. Literally a few weeks after his miracle, the new initiative received resonance, supported not only financially, but also by the participation of people who were initially far from this topic. Every week he organized events where he invited famous people to share their stories, giving people personal examples of how to change the course of events. He wanted everyone to have the opportunity to consider their social responsibility, to see others not just as statistics, but as living people with stories and struggles. A few months after he began working actively in this field, he found himself back in the same place where he had experienced his first encounter with prejudice. This time he was not alone. He had a team with him, ready to engage in open dialogue. They held posters with slogans about the right of every person to a decent life. This time the atmosphere was different. People who had previously looked down on the homeless began to stop and read. The meetings became more exciting, and in response to the call to responsibility, they began to ask questions. Elon felt again the spark he had once lost, continuing to fight for a better world. He understood that change takes time, but the belief in better times was gradually becoming visible. Every conversation, every meeting, every shoulder given in support now mattered, reflecting changes in human relationships. This experience was not only life-changing for Elon Musk, but also a wave of social norms. He learned that each person has the potential to change the world, starting with communication, and that it is important to see each person not as an isolated element, but as part of a complex mechanism of society, where attention to each includes the power of unification. Elon knew that his experiment wasn't just over, it was just the beginning of a journey that would be shared with others who would later be able to tell their stories of their struggles and victories, and perhaps it would be these small steps that would move society forward, opening up new horizons and creating a world where everyone would be heard and heard. The next chapter of his journey was the launch of a personal project, a foundation dedicated to social justice and supporting those who needed help the most. It was his new mission, his new passion, a reminder that even one person can make an impact on the world. The creation of the foundation was a major step not only in his life, but in the lives of thousands of people who had found themselves on the margins of society. Elon managed to attract the attention of the press to his project, and soon his initiative gained wide publicity. He organized regular fundraising events, training of social workers, and programs to help the homeless, relying on the practical stories of those who had gone through trials and tribulations and come out into the light. Attention to the issue of social inequality began to grow, and with it the number of volunteers increased. Every donation, every piece of advice, and every smile from those who felt that their lives were changing for the better gave Elon powerful motivation for further action. As part of the foundation, he launched a program aimed at retraining and psychological support. These were courses that helped people restore work skills, learn how to create a resume, pass interviews, and even engage in personal growth. Along with this, there were regular meetings at which participants shared their stories, gradually blurring the boundaries between them and us. One of the most memorable moments was meeting a young woman named Emily. She was homeless, but thanks to the Foundation's program, she was able to return to society. Emily shared her story of losing her job and becoming an addict. She spoke emotionally about her fears and hopes. That day, the room full of listeners was so quiet that you could hear the tears falling on the floor. People were touched, and they began to share their stories, creating an atmosphere of mutual support and understanding. Elon now understood that his own struggles, his own experiences in the restaurant and encounters with bias, had led to him becoming part of a much larger movement. People began baking bread together, discussing how they could make a difference in each other's lives. They began connecting not as strangers, but as friends sharing their story. These moments, when someone who had seemed lost found their place in society again, became the benchmark for the project's success. However, despite the Foundation's growing success, Elon soon saw that there were larger systemic problems that would not simply go away. He faced issues with government, funding, travel, and politicians who sometimes looked at his project through a lens of incomprehension. His ideas were often viewed with suspicion, and he realized that to achieve comprehensive change, he would need to engage with local government to advance policies that supported those in need. One of the solutions was to hold a large conference to which he invited successful businessmen, activists, and officials. Without knowing how, he managed to gather under one roof people who could make real changes in social policy. This became a real test, because on such a platform, differences of opinion were inevitable, but Elon was ready for it. During the conference, he proposed creating working groups of businessmen and social workers who would develop joint initiatives to improve the situation in the area of homelessness. He shared his successes and failures, talking about how much one person can do if he has support, and although it was difficult, he understood that dialogue was necessary for mutual understanding. By the end of the conference, many ideas had emerged that went beyond the usual practices. One of the most valuable was the creation of a program that would unite private and public entities to develop sustainable and effective places to live. Soon everyone agreed that they needed to act together and outlined a plan for joint steps. Elon at this time felt supported and saw that the idea of social responsibility received a new impetus. Now it was not only at the level of words, but also at the level of deeds. After the conference, his foundation moved to a new level. Now the initiatives began to expand, uniting more and more people. Elon and his team began to receive letters from those who wanted to support the project, turning it into a movement. People began to realize that society needed change, and each of the actions could create a domino effect, changing lives for the better. Looking back, Elon realized that what had started as a simple experiment had become something much bigger, a journey to understand human nature, to uncover hidden stories, and to create space for conversation. He realized that real change starts small, with human empathy, with the desire to help and learn from others. It was through this that he found new hope. Change is possible if each of us reaches out to each other. Now it was time to move forward, to unlock the true potential of society. A cultural unity that can transcend any barrier. This was the beginning of another chapter in his life, a chapter where every action mattered, where everyone was not just a spectator, but a participant in a story about love, hope, and humanity. It's been a while since Elon Musk began his journey from successful businessman to social activist, and his foundation has become a center of attraction for everyone who wanted to change the world for the better. He changed his outlook on life, gaining confidence that small actions can lead to large-scale changes, and every morning, waking up with new ideas and plans. He felt that his work confirmed that unity and humanity are not just words, but a force capable of changing real lives. One day, while sitting in his office, he received a letter from one of the participants in his program, a young man named Jacob. In the letter, Jacob shared his story of how, in an effort to change his life, he went through many difficulties, experienced homelessness, but found support through Elon's foundation. Now he has found a job, restored relationships with his family, and even began to help others who found themselves in a similar situation. He wrote, "You did not just give me a chance. You showed me a path that I can take. Now I want to be the same kind of agent of hope for others." This letter deeply touched Elon to tears. Jacob's words became a confirmation for him, his efforts were not in vain. Elon realized that change isn't always easy, and that sometimes the path to genuine engagement is a rocky one. Meeting people who were the same homeless people he had once feared or been prejudiced against became part of his new reality. He began organizing events where the conversations were not only about homelessness, but also about finding inner confidence and strength. Gradually, these stories began to trickle into the hearts of those who were willing to listen. The following month, the foundation hosted a major event at the community center where people could meet, socialize, and share their stories. In an atmosphere of friendship and understanding, filled with laughter and hope, the decades-old wall of mistrust fell away. Young volunteers and veterans of the program worked together as one, including Jacob, who inspired others with his example. On the eve of the event, Elon reflected on how many people could be connected through a simple act of kindness. At this celebration, stories intertwined like threads in a fabric. Everyone shared their experiences. People hugged, laughed, exchanged contacts and made plans for the future. Filled with hope, the atmosphere was amazing, as if the world was being reborn every minute, while everyone brought their strong and vulnerable side to the common history of humanity, where no one is left alone. where everyone can become a support for each other. By the end of the evening, Elon walked out on stage. His heart was fluttering with emotion. He felt like he was witnessing real magic. People who once felt abandoned were now building their lives and supporting each other. This is not just a celebration, he began. This is a new chapter in our common journey. Each of us has the right to live a life full of hope, love, and support. We are all one family. And together we can create a world where there is no room for prejudice and fear, and every listener felt this sincerity in their hearts. It was not just an event, it was the beginning of a new era for the foundation and hope for everyone. The sunset rays were shining through the windows, creating a warm atmosphere. People were smiling, hugging each other, sharing more than just words. They were exchanging pieces of their souls. Elon realized that his people unfinished business. He knew it was now his job to hold that light and continue to pave the way for others. As the months passed, his efforts began to bear fruit. He established relationships with local and regional governments and was able to attract funding to expand the program. Outreach projects began to expand beyond the city limits, to entire states and even countries. His progress began to point to the importance of unity, and many influential businessmen began to support his efforts. Moments when he was able to see changes in people's lives always inspired him to new heights. Inspired by Jacob's example, he continued to work on housing programs, healthcare, and education. With each new project, with each new inspiring story, he realized more and more how much stronger and more important we are together than apart. A few years passed, and Elon found himself on the main stage in one of the world's largest cities, announcing a foundation built on the principles of humanity and cooperation. The audience was filled with thousands of people, from businessmen to those who had once been homeless. As he finished his speech, Jacob walked onto the stage, and applause filled the room, and the hands of friendship joined in a standing ovation. They raised both hands together, showing that it is unity and humanity that create true power. Elon never imagined that his experiment would start such a significant movement. He had inspired people's hearts, and now each of them was ready to give their bit. Together they were moving towards a new day, bringing light where there was none before. And although the journey was not yet complete, Elon knew that relationships and understanding still reigned supreme. And with each step they were getting closer to creating a world where everyone belonged, regardless of their past. It was a journey full of hope, where everyone was searching not just for an answer, but for a realized dream of humanity and justice. In the end, their work together was a true embodiment of what it meant to be human, not just to exist together, but to join forces in an eternal quest to make this world a better place. It was this understanding of his own purpose that became the most important part of his new self, not only opening up, but giving others the opportunity to be heard. That was what it meant to serve humanity. The story follows Elon Musk's transformation from a successful businessman to a social activist who decides to make the world a better place, starting with an experiment in which he experienced the life of a homeless person to understand the biases of society. Elon creates a foundation to help people in difficult situations. He organizes programs that help homeless people find work, get an education, and restore relationships with loved ones. With the help of his initiative, many people who were previously considered different begin to share their stories and help each other. Over time, the foundation grows, attracting the attention of the public and local authorities. Elon understands that unity and humanity are the power to change lives. In the audience at one of the large events, he and Jacob, one of the participants of the program, expressed the need for mutual understanding and support. This moment becomes a symbol of hope and change, showing that together, any difficulties can be overcome. The story highlights the importance of empathy and unification to create a better future for everyone.